Jack Miller returned home to find his family farmhouse reduced to ashes, a mystery that hid a deeper injustice. Someone had erased not just his home, but years of truth his father had fought to protect. Guided by his loyal dog, Rex, Jack uncovered a secret that changed everything, a legacy of sacrifice and danger. But just listen to how shocking the turn of events in this drama was, and why justice ultimately prevailed. Jack Miller stood at the edge of what used to be his home. The morning light fell weakly through gray clouds, casting a pale wash over the blackened skeleton of the farmhouse. The air was still, except for the occasional creak of a splintered beam shifting in the wind. His boots crunched over broken bricks, twisted nails, and ash that clung to everything like a shroud. For years, Jack had been somewhere far from this place, walking dusty roads in foreign lands, following orders he barely understood, living in a world where the line between survival and sacrifice was thin. But no matter how far he went, the thought of home was always with him. Now he had come back, and home was gone in a single night. The fire hadn't been slow or gradual. Neighbors said they saw a flash, a bright glow through the trees. By morning, there was nothing left but ash and silence. No explanation, no warning. The local fire department closed the case quickly, marking it an accident. But Jack couldn't accept that. Something about the way the ruins lay unsettled him. He took another step forward, inhaling the scent of smoke that still clung to the air, a scent that felt like loss itself. His eyes scanned the wreckage, a collapsed porch, a warped kitchen frame, shards of glass glinting in the dirt. Every fragment whispered questions, but the answer was nowhere in sight. Then something caught his eye. A faint imprint in the earth, paw-shaped, clear against the ashen ground. It trailed into the black ruins like a silent thread. Jack's heart tightened. The print was small but distinct, and it seemed to lead somewhere deeper into the wreckage. Beside him, Rex stirred. The German shepherd had been with Jack through every chapter of his life since returning from his last deployment, silent, loyal, almost instinctive in ways Jack could never explain. Rex's nose hovered low to the ground, tracing scents Jack could not sense. His ears twitched, his gaze fixed on the trail. Jack watched Rex for a long moment, his own mind pulling in two directions. On one hand, there was the pain of returning to nothing. On the other, there was an uneasy curiosity. Something about that paw print felt like a message. Something had been hidden in the farmhouse, something worth guarding even against the fire itself. The official story was simple, an accident. But Jack knew life rarely offered simple truths. For him, there was more here, and he could not ignore it. He crouched down beside the print. The soil felt coarse, cold. His fingers traced the outline carefully. This was not a random mark. It was deliberate, almost purposeful, as if someone or something wanted to leave a trace, a sign, a clue. Jack straightened, brushing ash from his sleeve. He looked at the house one last time before stepping closer to the ruins. In his chest, a strange mix of emotions churned. Grief for what was lost, a deep-seated unease, and something heavier, the pull of something unresolved. It was not just closure he sought. There was something deeper, something unnamed that called to him. Rex let out a low, steady growl. Jack glanced down at him. The dog's eyes were fixed not on the wreckage, but beyond it, somewhere in the darkness beneath the ruins. Jack felt it then, the spark of intrigue. the kind that could pull a man into danger without his knowing, the kind that would not be silenced. Jack took a breath. He stepped forward, and the ruins seemed to draw him in. What the fire had hidden was waiting for him. Jack returned the next morning before sunrise. The air still smelled faintly of smoke, and the cold Ohio wind carried a sharp edge. The neighbors had begun to notice him. From a distance, old Mrs. Callahan shook her head at him while watering her garden. Others avoided looking directly at him. They whispered when he passed, their voices low, unsure. They said he should let it go, that it was time to move on. But Jack couldn't. The farmhouse had been more than walls and beams. It was a place woven with memory. Laughter echoing in the kitchen, his father teaching him to fix the tractor, the scent of his mother's bread rising in the mornings. That loss was something Jack carried deeper than the scars of war. For Jack, this was not about a burnt building. It was about reclaiming something of himself that had been lost, a tether to his roots, a piece of peace he hadn't found since leaving the service. His life after the army had been fractured. Nights blurred into restless sleep, his mind haunted by memories he could not escape. Friends he had trusted had gone silent. He'd built walls around himself, but they offered no comfort. Now, standing in the blackened remains of his home, Jack realized this was his chance, not just to uncover the truth of the fire, but to rediscover who he was. With Rex at his side, Jack began digging through the ashes. His hands were careful, methodical, brushing away soot like a sculptor uncovering something precious. Day after day, he returned to the ruins. Hours stretched into evenings. Rex never left his side, moving quietly with him, tail low, but eyes alert, as if sensing Jack's pain as clearly as his own. The neighbors' whispers grew louder, but Jack paid them no mind. This work was personal. It was his way of facing the grief he had carried alone. One afternoon, as sunlight cut through a gap in the clouds, Jack shifted a pile of charred wood. Beneath it, he found the edge of something buried. He knelt, pulling at the debris until a scorched, battered photo album emerged. Its cover was warped, pages curled and brittle, but he recognized the faded smiles of his family. His chest tightened and a lump rose in his throat. Beside it lay a rusted locket, its chain broken. Jack pried it open gently. Inside was a tiny photograph, a younger version of his father, standing beside someone Jack did not recognize. A wave of emotions swelled within him, sorrow, longing, and a growing empathy for the man who had raised him under difficult circumstances. As he dug further, Jack discovered something more curious, a small bundle tucked beneath where the floorboards had once been. Carefully, he pried it free. It was a stack of old envelopes, charred at the edges, but still intact enough to read. He unfolded them with trembling fingers. The letters spoke of a long-hidden family conflict. There were mentions of debts that stretched back decades, of arguments kept from children to shield them from worry. And then, beneath the fading ink, there was a note that struck deeper, a warning addressed to his father, referring to something dangerous, something worth protecting. Jack's brow furrowed. The farmhouse fire no longer felt like an accident. A quiet compassion filled Jack's chest. It was not only for himself, for the loss of home, of certainty, but for his father. The man he thought he knew, whose own burdens and secrets had gone unspoken. He realized his father had carried more than anyone understood. Rex barked suddenly, sharp and insistent. Jack looked up, startled. The sound came from deeper in the ruins, where the shadows lay thickest. Rex's stance was rigid, his eyes fixed. Jack felt that same pull he had felt the first day, a mixture of fear, curiosity, and resolve. He rose slowly, brushing the ash from his sleeves. Whatever Rex had found now became a part of Jack's mission. He knew he couldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. The ruins were calling him further in. The morning air was colder now. Jack felt it deep in his bones as he approached the ruins. The sky hung heavy, gray, as if the world itself sensed the weight of what he was about to uncover. Rex moved beside him in silence, the dog's steps deliberate, as though guiding Jack toward something long buried. For days, Jack had sifted through ashes and splintered boards, uncovering fragments of the past, relics of family, scraps of memory. But something told him he was close to the heart of it. He worked with quiet determination, each movement slower, heavier, as if he knew the answer might break him. Then, beneath a collapsed section of the farmhouse floor, his gloved hand struck metal. Cold, solid. Jack froze. His breath caught. He knelt and began clearing away ash and debris. The steel box was heavier than it looked, scorched and warped by fire, but locked fast. His hands trembled as he brushed away the dirt. The smell of smoke was stronger now, curling around him like a shadow from the past. It took effort, hours, to pry the box free. The sound of metal shifting against debris echoed strangely in the quiet ruins. When he finally brought it into the light, the weight of it felt like a promise, or a warning. Jack set the box on what remained of the porch and studied it. Its surface was pitted and blackened. The lock was rusted shut, but Jack found a piece of scrap metal and worked it until the clasp gave way with a sharp snap. Inside, wrapped carefully in oilskin, was something Jack had never expected. A set of old military medals, their bronze and silver worn, but still bearing the marks of honor, and beneath them a stack of documents, brittle at the edges, but intact enough to read. His breath faltered as he pulled the papers free. The letters were written in his father's hand. They spoke of a covert operation decades earlier, a mission that had never been spoken of at home. There were maps, coded notes, and reports marked with secrecy. As Jack read further, the tone shifted. The words carried fear, warnings addressed to his father, references to threats, to danger. A note, faded and torn, hinted at something far greater than Jack could grasp, a secret worth dying for. Jack felt his chest tighten. His father's life, it seemed, had been filled with burdens he had never known. And now the truth was laid bare in his hands. This was not just a mystery of a burned farmhouse. This was silenced history. The despair hit him like a weight pressing down on his shoulders. His home wasn't gone because of accident. It had been erased, burned to hide something deeper. His father, a man he had thought he knew, had lived with danger and secrecy, and perhaps because of that, he had been taken from them. Jack sank to his knees beside the box, the letters slipping through his fingers. His mind swirled with questions he couldn't answer. Why had his father kept this? Who had wanted it buried? And why had the fire taken everything? The ruins around him seemed to close in. The wind whispered through the splintered beams, carrying the ghosts of the past. For the first time in years, Jack felt utterly alone, not only in the physical world, but in his own life. Rex stepped closer. Without hesitation, the dog rested his head against Jack's knee. The gesture was simple, but it was enough. Jack looked down into Rex's steady eyes and felt something shift inside him. The despair was heavy, but it wasn't complete. There was still something left, a quiet resilience. Jack closed his eyes and drew a deep breath. The pieces of the past were not just ashes to be mourned. They were a call, a challenge, and somewhere deep down, he knew he could not turn away. The farmhouse was gone, but the truth it had hidden had found him, and he would have to face it. Jack sat in the ruins, the steel box open before him. The metals caught a slant of light, glinting softly through the smoke and ash. The documents lay scattered around him, yellowed with age. The ink faded, but still holding the weight of truth. For a long moment, Jack said nothing. The air was quiet except for the occasional creak of timber settling in the wind. Around him, the farmhouse lay still, not as a home anymore, but as a monument to something far greater. And then, strangely, a calm began to settle over him. It was as if all the anger, the grief, and the despair he had carried here over days of searching were dissolving into clarity. He understood now. This fire, devastating, final, was not simply destruction. It was a message, a closing chapter. His father had protected something bigger than himself, bigger than their family, something worth fighting for. Jack looked again at the letters, at the careful, urgent words his father had written. They spoke of loyalty, of sacrifice, of carrying a burden for the sake of others. His father had chosen to shield them from the truth. He had chosen silence, even at great cost, because what he guarded was dangerous and precious. Jack's fingers brushed over the metals again. He thought of the man who had raised him, not just as a father, but as a soldier, bound by duty. He thought of the years he himself had spent in service, of the weight of promises made and kept. And he realized something. His father's fight had not ended. Not really. It had passed to him. A surge of determination rose in Jack, strong and steady. He wiped soot from his face, standing slowly among the ruins. The heaviness of loss was still there, but it was joined now by resolve. He was no longer just a man searching for answers. He was a man answering a call. Rex came to his side, his steps deliberate, tail low but steady. Jack placed a hand on the dog's neck. "Let's finish this," he said quietly. It was not a vow of revenge. It was something deeper. Jack knew that what he carried now was more than a family mystery. It was a legacy, one of sacrifice, of courage, and of truth. He would finish what his father had started. Not for himself, but to honor the choices his father had made, the burdens he had carried in silence. The farmhouse was no longer simply ruin. In Jack's eyes, it had become a symbol, a testament to resilience, to the idea that even in destruction there can be meaning. Even in loss, there can be a seed of renewal. Jack took one last look around the charred remains. His father's life, his own life, had been shaped by service, by struggle, by purpose. And now Jack felt the first spark of a new mission take root. This was no longer about the fire, it was about what lay beyond it. He tucked the medals carefully into his jacket and gathered the documents. Rex stayed close, eyes fixed on him. Together they stepped away from the ashes of home. Jack felt the weight of the past lighten just a little. In its place grew a quiet fire of hope. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he no longer feared it. The truth was waiting, and he would meet it head-on. For Jack, loss had become a beginning, pain had become strength, and mystery had become inspiration. In the end, the burned farmhouse was not an ending. It was the spark for something new, a reminder that even amid ruin, hope could be reborn. And Jack knew he would carry that truth for the rest of his life.